The heavy oak doors didn't just open, they splintered inward. The chaos was immediate, a wave of dark tactical gear and shouted commands that shattered the somber silence of the chapel. FBI. Nobody move. Hands where I can see them. Men and women in formal wear froze, their faces masks of confusion. I saw my brother Leo spin around, his typical arrogant smirk dissolving into pure, unadulterated terror as an agent slammed him against a decorative pillar. My gaze remained locked on him, cold and steady, as I slowly lowered my phone from my ear. In the sudden, ringing silence, my voice was the only thing that moved, unnaturally calm. "Asset is secure," I said. "Execute Directive 7. It's a full-spectrum interdiction. Just 30 minutes earlier, the only sound was quiet grief. The air was thick with the scent of lilies, heavy and cloying. I stood near the back with my husband, David, a kind man whose steady presence was my only anchor in the storm of my family. I was trying my best to remain invisible, a familiar role for me, but of course that was never an option. My brother Leo, the family's perpetual golden boy who wore his charisma like a weapon, made his way towards me. He had that familiar smirk on his face, the same one he'd worn when my parents co-signed on his condo after telling me money was too tight to help with my student loans. It was the smirk of a man who had never faced a single consequence. "Oh, look!" he announced, his voice carrying easily to the nearby pews filled with my grandfather's old friends. "The worthless soldier's here to pay her respects. Find a nice safe desk to hide behind at the GSA. Anna?" He chuckled, waiting for the familiar flinch. The quiet retreat he always got from me. It was another casual cruelty, another pebble on a mountain of them he'd thrown at me my entire life. But this time, I barely heard him. His words were just static, because my attention was fixed over his shoulder, my eyes scanning the crowd with a focus he could never comprehend. And then, I saw him. Fourth row, gray suit, face impassive. A man who had no business being at my grandfather's funeral. A man I knew intimately from the hundreds of pages in a file stamped Cobra 7. He was a notorious fixer for a Chechen arms syndicate, a ghost who facilitated deals that ended in carnage. My blood ran cold, and a different kind of fury, a sharp, professional rage, eclipsed any personal hurt. This wasn't a social call. This was a business transaction, and they were using my family's tragedy as a cover. Leo's words were meant to be a paper cut, a petty sting. He had no idea he'd just pointed a spotlight at the most dangerous man in the room. I leaned over to my husband, my voice a low whisper. "We have to go, right now." To understand why my next call brought the full weight of the federal government crashing down on my family's grief, you have to understand the lie they all believed, and the truth that was about to burn their world to the ground. To truly grasp the impossible tightrope I was walking, you have to go back about a year before that fateful day at the funeral. You have to sit with me at my parents' dinner table, a place where my brother's ego was always the main course. The scene was a familiar one. My father, Robert, a retired manufacturing executive obsessed with the tangible symbols of his legacy, was beaming at the head of the table. He always saw his son as his true heir and me. Well, I was a footnote. A quiet daughter who'd taken a bewilderingly unlucrative path. My brother Leo was holding court, waving his hands around as he described his latest brilliant venture, flipping a series of run-down warehouses near the port. He spoke of profit margins, zoning variances, and logistics with a swagger that captivated our parents. They hung on his every word, their faces glowing with pride. He was building an empire, he'd say, and they believed him. During a rare lull in his monologue, I tried to share a small piece of my own life. "I was given a meritorious service citation last week," I said, my voice feeling small in the wake of his booming presentation. "It was for a project I was leading." My father turned to me and patted my hand, the gesture so full of condescension it might as well have been a pat on a child's head. "That's lovely, Anna. Did they give you a little plaque for your cubicle?" Before I could even respond, Leo laughed from across the table, probably for most efficient paper pusher. "That's great, sis. Seriously." Meanwhile, he said, turning back to Dad, "I'm building a real legacy. Something you can see and touch." I just nodded, the commendation letter feeling like ash in my purse. I didn't see a plaque. I saw the sleepless nights, the immense pressure, the threads I'd pulled together that had saved. Well, I couldn't tell them what it saved, so I just smiled. Now contrast that loud, suffocating dinner with my real world. A world that existed in a silent, freezing room deep within the Hoover Building, a sensitive, compartmented information facility, or SIF. There were no family photos here, no boasts, just the low hum of servers and the blue glow of data streams on a wall-sized screen. Standing beside me was Assistant Director Carmichael, a sharp, no-nonsense career agent who headed the FBI's Counter-Proliferation Center. He was a man who didn't care about swagger, he cared about results. He listened, his eyes fixed on the screen, as I pointed to the very warehouses my brother had been bragging about. My voice was precise, stripped of all emotion. Leo thinks he's flipping warehouses, I explained, connecting shipping manifests to classified satellite imagery of a North Korean port. He isn't. He's providing the final critical link in a chain of custody for dual-use technology. I pointed to a web of financial transactions. The shell corporations he's working with are flagged by Mossad. We believe the target isn't real estate, it's a front for moving refined centrifuge components. I could feel the immense weight of my own words. This wasn't about my brother's ego anymore. This was about national security on a global scale. He wasn't just a blowhard, he was a pawn in a game that could get millions of people killed. Carmichael studied the screen for a long, silent minute, his expression grim. He then turned to me, his gaze direct and unwavering. There was no condescension here, only the heavy burden of command. "This is now case file 734 Cobra," he said. "And from now on, you're the lead analyst, Anna. This is your case." In that moment, I felt a terrifying mix of validation and dread. I was finally being seen for who I was, and I had never felt more alone. The disconnect was made even clearer a week later, during a phone call with my mother, Helen, a woman who believed family peace was more important than fairness, or even truth. She'd called to check in, but it was really a call to manage my feelings. "Anna, you need to be more supportive of your brother," she began, her tone gentle but firm. "His world is so cutthroat, so high pressure. Your government job is safe, it's stable. It's important to have that, but Leo, he needs us to be his cheerleaders. He needs our encouragement." I listened, staring at a redacted document on my desk about a failed intercept in the Strait of Malacca. Safe. Stable. I thought about the lives hanging in the balance, the silent calculations I made every day. What could I even say? She wasn't just wrong, she was living in an entirely different reality, one her son had carefully constructed for her. So I just murmured something non-committal. "I know, Mom. I understand. For years, I let them have their narrative. I let them believe I was the safe one, the footnote. I compartmentalized. But sitting in that car, the face of the Cobra -7 fixer burned into my mind. I realized my two worlds were about to collide. They had used my family's name and business to conduct their dirty work. They thought they were untouchable, but they never understood the rules of the world I lived in. The moment the car door closed, sealing us away from the funeral home, my husband David gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. "Anna, what was that? You looked like you saw a ghost back there." He was right, I did. But not the kind he was thinking of. I turned to him, my mind already a hurricane of threat analysis and emergency protocols. The sting of Leo's insult had vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. It was the focus I had been trained for, the ability to push all emotion aside and see only the mission. "Not a ghost, David," I said, my voice steady. "A ghost in the making. The man in the gray suit, back row? You didn't see the exchange, did you?" He passed a data key to one of Leo's associates during the handshake line. David stared at me, his confusion deepening. My hurt feelings didn't matter anymore. This was a national security threat in active motion. My decision was instant. It was procedural. I pulled out my encrypted government-issue phone, a heavy, utilitarian device that felt more a part of me than my own skin. I didn't dial 911. I accessed a secure voice channel that connected me directly to the Counter-Proliferation Center command hub. The operator on the other end was professional and immediate. My voice came out as a near monotone, stripped of all personal inflection. "This is Analyst Jensen, call sign Cassandra," I began. "I am invoking National Security Protocol 11B. I have direct visual confirmation of Cobra 7 target, the Alchemist, at these coordinates." I gave the address of the funeral home. "He has made contact with a subject linked to my active investigation. The exchange is happening under the cover of this event. I assess this is a live transfer of sensitive materials. I need immediate tactical interdiction." There was a pause, and then a new voice came on the line. Sharp, clear, and familiar. It was Assistant Director Carmichael. "Cassandra, confirm visual ID is 100%, he commanded. His question wasn't a challenge, it was a critical part of the process, the final lock in a chain of immense consequence. He was ensuring every box was checked before unleashing hell. "Confirmed, sir," I replied, without a flicker of doubt. 100%. "He's moving with the primary subject's inner circle." The trust in his next words was something my own family had never given me. "Understood. The DCSRT is 10 minutes out. Maintain your distance. We're greenlighting Directive 7. The site is now a federal crime scene." The line went dead. The trap was set, not with emotion, but with the cold, hard mechanics of the law I served. As we parked a block away, watching the first black SUVs roll silently into position, I felt a strange calm. Leo thought his power came from money and connections. He was about to learn what real power was, the kind that doesn't need to brag, the kind that can shut your entire world down with a single authorized command. The main chapel of the funeral home was a stage, and my family were the lead actors in a somber play. The eulogy had just concluded, leaving a vacuum of quiet, respectful murmuring. Attendees shuffled in the aisles, offering condolences with bowed heads. At the front of it all, my family stood as pillars of the community, accepting sympathies with practiced grief. My mother, Helen, dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, while my father, Robert, stood stoic and strong. And Leo had his arm wrapped around my mother's shoulders, playing the part of the grieving, dutiful son to perfection. He was the man of the family now, the heir apparent taking his rightful place. From my vantage point near the entrance, I watched the performance, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. They looked so convincing. They almost had me believing their sorrow was real. Then the doors flew open. It wasn't a creak or a swing, it was a violent breach. The FBI tactical team didn't just raid the room, they flowed into it like water, a terrifyingly silent and efficient tide of black gear and absolute purpose. They moved with a speed that defied the stunned stillness of the room. 2 agents broke left, immediately pinning the alchemist against the wall before he could even process what was happening. 4 others formed a tight, menacing circle around Leo and his associate, cutting them off from everyone. The performance of grief shattered instantly. Leo's face contorted, his sorrow replaced with pure, arrogant rage. "Get your hands off me," he yelled, his voice cracking with indignation. "Do you know who my father is?" An agent behind him didn't even flinch, calmly securing his wrists in cuffs. "Sir," the agent said, his voice a dispassionate blade cutting through the chaos, "you're being detained as a person of interest in an ongoing federal investigation into violations of the Arms Export Control Act." That was the cue for my father's final, blustering act. His face was a blotchy, furious red as he stormed toward the lead agent. "This is an outrage. My son is a respected businessman. I demand to know who's responsible for this." He was used to his anger getting results, to his status clearing any obstacle. But the lead agent didn't even look at him. He simply sidestepped my father's tirade, his eyes scanning the room with a calm intensity until they found me. He moved towards me, his path clearing as people instinctively stepped away. The entire chapel fell into a deep, profound silence, the kind where you can hear your own heart beating. He stopped a respectful 2 feet away from me, his demeanor shifting from tactical to professionally deferential. "Ma'am?" he said, his voice perfectly clear in the stunned quiet. "Assistant Director Carmichael, for you." He held out a satellite phone. Every eye in that room, every friend, every distant relative, my mother, my father, and my brother, swiveled to me. The word ma'am, delivered with such earnest respect from the man in command of this chaos, was a thunderclap in their reality. It wasn't a nickname like Paper Pusher Anna, or a dismissive title like the Worthless Soldier. It was a rank. They didn't see the phone. They saw a scepter of power being handed to the one person in the room they had never, ever considered powerful. Time seemed to slow down as I took it from him. I could feel their collective worldview, not just cracking, but utterly disintegrating. Leo's jaw was hanging open, his face a grotesque mask of confusion. I could see the frantic calculations behind his eyes as he tried to make it make sense. The paper pusher. A quiet sister. The one in charge? It was an impossible equation. My father's face had drained of all color, leaving it a pasty, sickly gray. He took a staggering step backward, his hand clutching his chest as if his heart had physically broken. His brain was failing to reconcile the daughter he had mocked for 30 years with the woman being deferred to by the FBI. He looked from his cuffed, defeated son to me, his world physically tilting on its axis. He whispered my name, a broken, questioning sound. Anna. I met his gaze for a brief, unreadable moment before lifting the phone to my ear. My voice was crisp, professional, and loud enough for him to hear. Carmichael, it's me. We have Cobra 7. I paused, my eyes finding Leo's one last time. And we have the whole damn nest. My entire life, my family had defined me by what they thought I wasn't. In that single silent moment, as the FBI led my brother away in handcuffs, they were finally forced to confront what I was. The world outside the black command vehicle was a chaotic canvas of flashing red and blue lights painting the evening sky. Inside, however, there was only the quiet hum of electronics and an atmosphere of intense professional calm. I sat across from Assistant Director Carmichael, giving my official statement, my voice even as I recounted the sequence of events. The agents who came and went from the vehicle looked at me with a new kind of respect. They didn't see a grieving daughter or a civilian caught in the crossfire. They saw the analyst who had decapitated a major proliferation network. They saw Cassandra. When the debrief was finally over, the door slid open and my husband, David, was standing there, a heavy blanket in his hands. He wordlessly wrapped it around my shoulders, his hands warm and steady. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to anymore. I saw it in his eyes, a new kind of awe, a profound understanding of the immense weight I had been carrying all these years, entirely alone. In his silence, I finally felt seen. 1 year later, the world had changed, or rather, my world had. The quiet hum of the command vehicle had been replaced by the quiet prestige of a corner office. A simple black plaque on the door read, Anna Jensen, Task Force Commander. My case file 734 Cobra, had exploded, spawning a multi-agency task force, Operation Cobra's Coil, and I was at its head. I stood at the head of a polished mahogany table, briefing a somber group of officials from the CIA, the Treasury, and the Department of Defense. I pointed to a complex web of financial transfers on the large screen behind me, my voice confident, my authority unquestioned. These people didn't need to be impressed by swagger, they were moved by data, by results. In this room, my quiet competence was not a weakness to be overlooked, but a strength to be harnessed. This was my new family, one forged not by blood, but by shared purpose and a mutual, unwavering respect. That sense of belonging was never more real than later that afternoon. After the briefing concluded, my small core team surprised me. There on my desk was a small cake with 2 candles clumsily stuck in the frosting. My 2nd anniversary of joining the Counter-Proliferation Center. There were no grand speeches. No performative applause like the kind my father used to demand for Leo. Instead, there were just quiet nods, genuine smiles, and a few jokes about my obsession with color-coded threat assessments. One of my senior agents, a former Marine raider named Mike, just handed me a plastic fork and said, "Couldn't have unraveled this mess without you, boss." That simple statement, that earned acknowledgement of my worth, felt more real and more valuable than any praise my family had ever tried to give me. This camaraderie, this trust earned through competence. It was the real legacy. Later that evening, as the city lights began to sparkle outside my window, a single email notification pinged on my computer. The subject line was just my name, Anna. It was from my mother. I clicked it open, my heart rate remaining perfectly steady. The message was short, each word heavy with defeat. Your father's company was forced into bankruptcy. Leo's sentencing is next month. They're saying 15 years. We were so proud of him, Anna. We never understood. I don't think we ever knew you at all. I read the words over and over, and what I felt was not triumph, not anger, not even pity. What I felt was a profound and final distance. It was the sound of a door quietly closing on a room I no longer lived in, a room I had no desire to ever visit again. My family had been a puzzle I could never solve because I was the missing piece they had thrown away. I moved my mouse, highlighting the message. Then, with a quiet click, I sent it to the archive. My gaze returned to the glowing case files on my desk, to the work that still needed to be done, to the future I was building. My family believed their legacy was in the name on their buildings. I learned a true legacy is in the threats you neutralize in silence. If you've ever had your quiet strength mistaken for weakness, share your story below. In this community, your true rank is always respected.